I worked my shift at the engineering firm in a part of town that felt worlds away from the artistic district Jessica called home. My commute was long, and by the time I arrived back in our cozy studio apartment near the river, the smell of burnt coffee filled the air, a bitter reminder of our strained morning. Jessica had been preoccupied all day, her eyes fixed on the papers scattered across the kitchen table. I never understood how she managed to run her law practice from that cluttered space, but it was a testament to her dedication, or maybe desperation. It was hard to tell anymore. As I entered, she glanced up with an air of practiced calm, a mask hiding who knew what storm behind those hazel eyes. "James, dear," she said, her voice smooth as silk, yet laced with the tension that had become so familiar between us. "Hey," I forced a smile, feeling the worn-out chair beneath me as I sat down at the table. The creak echoed in the silence. "How'd your day go?" She sighed, her shoulders barely rising off the seat. "It could been better." I reached for the coffee, now lukewarm and bitter on my tongue. Jessica's favorite mug sat beside it, a gift from an affair she'd had before we met. It was a constant reminder of the web of lies that I was slowly becoming entangled in. As evening shadows crept across the walls, the tension between us thickened. We exchanged monosyllabic answers to each other's questions, neither one daring to broach the topic that hung like an elephant in the room, her infidelity. It was a minefield of unspoken truths and half-truths. I began preparing my dinner, trying to find solace in the mundane tasks while Jessica worked on some case or another. Her fingers danced across her keyboard, clicking keys with increasing speed as if she were racing against time itself, or perhaps against me. Our relationship had been a balancing act ever since that fateful day when I discovered her with another man. The shock was still fresh in my memory, the pain a dull ache beneath the surface. We'd both been trying to reconstruct our shattered trust on shaky ground, and today felt like we were standing at the edge of a chasm, staring into the abyss. Jessica finally closed her laptop, rubbing her tired eyes. "I'm going to see a client tomorrow," she announced abruptly. "You'll have to manage the household expenses for a few days." My heart sank as I watched her gather her belongings and head towards the bedroom. It was a subtle shift in our power dynamic, a change that whispered of betrayal even though it was just one more lie in an endless tapestry. As night fell, Jessica didn't join me on the couch to watch television or share a meal together. She remained isolated in her private sanctuary, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the bitter remnants of burnt coffee. I wondered how much longer we could keep this fragile masquerade going before it all unraveled into chaos. And yet, as I lay there, the city outside alive with its distant hum, a part of me still clung to hope that somehow, someway, we would find our way back from the edge of deception to the warmth of trust and honesty. A hope that tomorrow might bring a different story. But for now, it was just another night in the life of James and Jessica, caught in the deceptive calm between the lines. The morning light crept into our apartment through the half-drawn blinds, casting a pale glow on the chaotic landscape of papers and scattered objects that seemed to have been flung into every corner. The air was heavy with yesterday's unresolved tensions, and I could feel the weight of them bearing down upon me as I sat up in bed. Jessica had already left for her client meeting, leaving behind only a note with the household budget scribbled hastily on it. It was an understated cruelty, each number a silent reminder that she was shouldering the financial burden alone now, and every unmet bill was yet another chasm between us. I wandered into the kitchen, searching for some semblance of normalcy amidst the chaos. The burnt coffee pot still sat on the counter, its acrid smell a lingering echo of yesterday's strained breakfast. It seemed like a lifetime ago that we'd shared such an ordinary moment together, before everything had fallen apart. As I poured myself a cup from the fresh pot, hoping for a more palatable brew, I couldn't help but notice the subtle changes in our home. The way Jessica had begun to hoard her personal belongings as if they were her last bastion of privacy, the awkward silences that now filled every room. It was like living in a slow-motion demolition of our life together. The sound of keys jingling outside signaled her return. I took a deep breath and composed my face into something resembling neutrality before heading to the door to let her in. But as she stepped inside, her eyes avoiding mine, I realized that even the fragile illusion we'd been clinging to was now on precarious footing. "Morning," I said with a forced cheerfulness, feeling like I was performing a role in a play whose script I no longer remembered. "Good morning." Her voice was distant, a stranger's greeting in our own home. She moved past me without another word, going straight to the kitchen and fixing herself a cup of coffee, her ritual that had become increasingly isolated since her infidelity came to light. I tried to bridge the gap between us with small talk about her client meeting, but every question seemed to land awkwardly, like stones thrown into water that refused to ripple. Her answers were curt, clipped, and guarded, the kind that spoke volumes without saying anything at all. As we silently consumed our breakfast, the house felt more like a battlefield than a home. Every glance felt like an invasion of privacy, every word unsaid an accusation hanging heavy in the air. Yet neither of us seemed willing or able to break the silence fully, to confront the reality that our relationship was on the brink of collapse. After clearing away the breakfast dishes, I stood at the kitchen sink looking out at the river, once a peaceful source of solace, but now just another mundane backdrop to our unraveling lives. Jessica lingered by the table, her eyes tracing over the scattered papers as if searching for an escape route, a new case to lose herself in, perhaps. The silence between us was oppressive until my phone buzzed with an email notification from my workplace. It was an invitation to a mandatory meeting on Friday, another reminder that life moved on regardless of our personal crisis. The thought made my chest tighten with the realization that we might not have much time left together. I turned back to find Jessica's gaze fixed on me, and in that moment there was a spark, a glimmer of something raw and honest that I hadn't seen in too long. It was fleeting, quickly masked by the defensive walls she'd built around herself, but it was enough to give me hope for just one more chance at bridging this chasm between us. James, Jessica began tentatively, let's. But before she could finish her thought, the sound of footsteps outside our apartment door interrupted. It was a loud knock, the kind that left no room for polite hesitation. My heart raced with a mixture of dread and uncertainty as I wondered who it might be, and what this new development would mean for the fragile facade we'd so desperately been trying to uphold. The knock reverberated through our silent apartment, shattering the delicate bubble of tension that had formed between us. Jessica's eyes widened slightly as she turned toward the sound, her lips pressed into a thin line, the same expression she'd worn when confronting the lawyer who'd brought news of her impending legal woes. I hesitated for a moment before moving to answer the door, my hand lingering on the handle as if reluctant to disturb what little peace we had left. But then I took a deep breath and opened it. The man standing there was unfamiliar, his late 20s clad in an unremarkable suit that seemed at odds with the faded apartment building's atmosphere. His eyes darted past me into the apartment before returning to me with a mixture of confusion and urgency. "Sorry to disturb you," he said, holding out a package wrapped in brown paper with my name scribbled on it in hasty handwriting. "You're James, right? The husband of Jessica." I took the package, feeling its weight, an odd mix of solid objects and perhaps a letter or papers inside. "Yes, that's me," I replied warily. "That's good," he said with a nod. "I was told to deliver this personally. You need to sign for it." There was something in his tone, a mixture of concern and caution that pricked my instincts. "What is it?" I asked, but the man just shook his head. "It's best if you open it yourself," he suggested, before stepping back and eyeing our apartment over my shoulder as if searching for someone or something. Jessica appeared behind me, her gaze landing on the package with a flicker of anxiety. "Who is this?" she asked sharply. The man smiled awkwardly. "Name's Alex. I was sent by your lawyer." That name, lawyer, sent a spike of fear through me. This wasn't some random delivery. It was something deliberate, carefully planned to disrupt whatever fragile calm we'd managed to forge between us. And yet, part of me couldn't help but cling to the hope that this was somehow going to fix things, that there might be an out from the suffocating despair that had been our reality for so long. "Thanks," I said to Alex, forcing a nod. "I'll take care of it." As soon as he turned and walked away, Jessica grabbed my arm, her grip tight with unspoken urgency. "What is that?" she whispered, her eyes darting between the package and me. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling the weight of the unknown press down on us both. "But maybe it's a way out, a chance to fix things." Her expression was skeptical, but there was also something else there, a glimmer of hope perhaps, or desperation clinging onto whatever new possibility this mysterious package might bring. Together, we retreated into the sanctuary of our apartment, the air thick with anticipation and uncertainty. Jessica made tea while I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands shaking slightly as I unwrapped the brown paper. Inside was a set of documents tied together with a faded rubber band, alongside an empty USB drive and a note. A simple white sheet with 2 words scrawled in black ink. "Talk to me." I looked up at Jessica, her face pale but resolute. "This is it," I said softly. "Whatever comes next, we do this together." She nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, the closest thing to raw emotion I'd seen from her in months. We began to untangle the threads of our lives, each document shedding light on the darkest corners of our shared turmoil. A maze of legal paperwork that would either lead us out of this nightmare or bind us in its grasp. The USB drive was a silent invitation to secrets kept hidden, secrets I had yet to uncover, but somehow knew were connected to the tangled mess of our past. And as we sat there, surrounded by the remnants of our failed marriage, we both realized that it wasn't just about finding answers. It was about facing the reality that we might not be able to hold on to each other anymore. But in those quiet moments between sobs and silent tears, in the unspoken understanding of each passing glance, there flickered a hope, a fragile spark that refused to be extinguished even as our world unraveled around us. For now, it was enough to keep going forward together, no matter what came next. The days that followed were a blur of legal documents and clandestine meetings, our apartment transformed into a battlefield where every word was an ammunition, every glance a duel. Yet in the midst of this storm, we clung to each other like lifelines, 2 people desperately seeking salvation from the wreckage of what once was. Alex, our lawyer, became more than just a messenger. He was our guide through a labyrinth that threatened to swallow us whole. His words were laced with empathy and understanding, but they couldn't mask the grim reality we faced. Our marriage teetered on the edge of collapse, held together by threads as fragile as spider silk. We spent long hours poring over every line, every sentence, every clause, our hands often touching inadvertently as we worked side by side. The physical closeness was a double-edged sword. It ignited memories of laughter and love, but also rekindled the flames of anger and betrayal that had so nearly consumed us. But there were moments, fleeting yet palpable, when our eyes would meet over some shared realization or buried memory. They were the silent conversations we desperately needed to have but couldn't quite verbalize. They spoke volumes without saying anything at all. The USB drive became an obsession, a constant reminder of secrets yet unrevealed. It sat between us on the table, an unopened Pandora's box waiting for us to summon its contents into the light. But there were times when even that seemed too daunting, too much uncertainty, and too many potential just waiting to tear what little remained of our relationship apart. The tension in our apartment crackled like electricity, each word spoken feeling like a delicate experiment in whether we could still withstand the force of our combined emotions. We danced around the issue of trust, tiptoeing through minefields of memory and pain, both striving for honesty, but bound by the scars of deception that had marred our past. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting our small apartment in hues of deep oranges and purples, Jessica finally spoke what we'd all been avoiding. "James," she began hesitantly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I think it's time we open that drive." The room seemed to still around us, the air heavy with anticipation and dread. I took a deep breath and nodded, reaching for the USB drive that had become both a symbol of our plight and our only hope. Inserting it into her laptop, we braced ourselves for what lay within. The files were labeled with cryptic codes and acronyms, a language foreign to me but familiar to her, no doubt an intricate map of our shared turmoil. As the first document loaded, my heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat echoing the fear that gripped us both. It detailed instances where Jessica's firm had been involved in questionable cases, hinting at deeper corruption than we'd ever imagined. The next file was more personal, a trail of emails exchanged between Jessica and someone named Client Y. They spoke of clandestine meetings, vague references to being watched, and a sense of urgency that sent chills down my spine. But among the digital breadcrumbs were hints of fear and desperation from her, fragments of an apology, pleas for understanding. By the time we reached the last file, tears streamed silently down both our faces. It was a recording, a secret tape made in the heat of one of our countless fights. In it, Jessica spoke openly about her guilt, her regrets, and above all, her love for me and our shared struggle to hold on to each other. In that moment, something shifted inside us. We stopped being two warring factions and became once again James and Jessica, two flawed humans trying to navigate the treacherous waters of a relationship frayed by betrayal but not beyond repair. The final document was a letter from Alex, our lawyer. He'd seen what we were going through, had witnessed the raw emotion in every moment we shared. In his words, there was no more pretense, no sugarcoating the bitterness that had seeped into the marrow of our bones. But within that honesty lay a message of hope. If we chose to confront this darkness head-on, to face each other and ourselves with unflinching candor, then perhaps, just perhaps, we could find our way back from the edge of collapse to the solid ground of trust and understanding. It was not an easy road. There were no guarantees of success, but it was a path we both knew we had to take. So as the night deepened around us, James and Jessica looked into each other's eyes one last time before closing our laptops for good. We reached across the table that had become a chasm between us, our hands clasped together, not in fear or anger but with the tentative hope of renewal. Together we clicked send on the email containing all our secrets, our tangled threads now laid bare to Alex and ultimately to each other. And as dawn began to creep into our once shared sanctuary, we knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we'd face them side by side, our bond strengthened rather than shattered by the trials of our tumultuous journey. We were James and Jessica, no longer defined by the deceptive calm or the chaotic storms, but by a shared determination to reconstruct trust from the very foundations of our broken relationship. And as we began anew, hand in hand, we realized that sometimes it's only when the fabric unravels completely that we can begin to weave something truly strong, something resilient enough to hold together even the most fragile of hopes. The story concludes here, on the precipice of a new beginning. The pages have turned on our tale, but the chapters of James and Jessica's life are far from over. They're just taking on a different form, stitched together with raw emotion, hard-won trust, and the irreplaceable glue of honest conversation.